Welcome to the Moon Manifesting Podcast. Today I have a special guest with us. Please welcome Kira Sutherland. Kira is a medical astrologer and naturopath with a focus on sports nutrition and women's health. Kira is based here in Australia and she has over 25 years of experience in private practice. Throughout her career, Kira has lectured around the world, been featured on TV, and has even won awards for her contribution to the complementary health industry.
So you found my other bio.
I had to look at both.
Yeah.
So thank you, Kira, for being here on the Moon Manifesting podcast today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
Oh, wonderful. So today I've invited you onto the podcast basically because I've had a lot of questions about the moon cycle and the menstrual cycle. And with my own background in a bit of astrology and as a herbalist, I have a bit of knowledge here, but I really felt like you're the expert in this area.
Thank you.
So, I'd love to dive into your wisdom today to really demystify these natural cycles in our life. So to start off with, what would you like to share about how the moon cycle relates to the menstrual cycle?
Oh my gosh, there's so many directions we could go there, Kyra. It's, where do I even begin with that? So many women have a cycle of around 28, 29 days. But let's be honest, you can have a cycle from like 24, 25 days to 35, and that's actually considered normal. But for the average female, the average cycle is 4 weeks or 28 days. And then we have this magical, gorgeous, glowing orb in our sky that also has a 28, 29-day cycle. And so there's we've known this since, we go back to caveman, and the original calendar ever found was on a bone and it has 28 marks on it. And so we actually think the first calendar ever was created by a female tracking her menstrual cycle. You can go back in history and look at things like that. So we are forever these amazing cyclical beings as women. And it's, using the menstrual cycle and looking at all the different ways the moon correlates to this is just, I think, such a great way to tap into our own bodies and nature's wisdom that I think we get really removed from in modern times. We forget how cyclical we are as beings. And oh my gosh, there's so many different things to teach. You kind of have to hit me with actual topics. Otherwise you're going to get like a 1-hour monologue on, I don't know where I could go.
No, but this is great. Oh my goodness. I had no idea about like the first calendar, like being recorded on the bone and the 28 days. That's mind blowing. That is really interesting.
Yeah, you see it published on women's websites. Sometimes they're like, oh, man, this is their original tracking. And these female websites are like, that wasn't man, that was woman that was probably tracking that. There's no way a guy was tracking 28 days, right?
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So going a bit more specifically, I guess one of the things that I talk about a lot with women is menstruating on like either the new moon or the full moon. Like, can we talk a bit about the timing of our menstruation in the moon cycle?
Yeah. So, and then a lot of women, as you've just said, will either have their periods at the new moon or the full moon. And if you don't, there is nothing wrong with you. That's what a lot of people are like, oh my God, I'm not doing that. And it's like, you know what? That's okay too. Not all of us have, that equal cycle, but there are tricks to actually shifting your cycle so that it does happen at those times. Or I do believe that kind of the healthier we are living and following our body's natural rhythms, be it sleep-wake cycle, healthy eating, often we will then adjust to those new moon or full moon cycles. But there's ways of like sleeping outside in nature. Like often when women go camping, their body will adjust to the moon cycle because they're away from electronic pollution. By sleeping in a very, very dark room, that's a little bit probably colder temperature as well, but I don't know if that actually affects it. There are ways to try to shift to be at that cycle. And then some women are just always going to have a 32-day cycle and it's not going to quite fit. So yeah, I wouldn't overly stress on that, but and it's not, some people get really, oh my God, you have to ovulate on the full moon, because ovulation is a bit of like a full moon experience. It's when you're peaking, but in reality, just as many women get their period at the full moon as do ovulate.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And so I guess following on from that, like, does it mean anything if we tend to menstruate on the new moon or if we menstruate on the full moon? I once heard that if you're wanting to conceive, then trying to kind of time your menstruation with the new moon so that you can ovulate on the full moon can help with conception. But if you're trying to avoid conceiving,
that's really interesting. Yeah. I have read that as well. I'll be honest, as far as I know, astrologically, it doesn't actually matter. But we do have, you want me to go deep in astrology here?
Oh, go for it.
Some astrology? Okay. So we do have, I mean, we have that idea of ovulation is, where you're releasing the egg and it's an incredible fertile time. But in reality, that astrologically, that actually doesn't matter. But what we do have is we have what's called your lunar phase. Have you ever heard of you do astrology, so maybe you've heard of this, but your lunar phase. So we can all look up as women what shape anybody can look it up, not just women, but what shape the moon was the day you were born. And there are 8 moon shapes. You've got new moon, the crescent, first quarter, gibbous, full moon, disseminating, third quarter, and balsamic, just so everybody knows those. And but you can actually look up what day of the moon cycle you are born. So day 1 is the first day of the new moon, and what's known as your lunar phase is, so say do you know your lunar phase?
I do.
You know what day you're born?
Yeah, it was probably about day 8. It was like the day after the first quarter moon.
Okay, so your first quarter moon, day 8. So every month when the moon returns to the same shape as the day you were born, it doesn't matter if it's in the same astrological sign or not. We're just talking about shapes. That is referred to as your lunar peak. And it's been hypothesized for quite a long time. Dr. Jonas, Dr. Jonas, let me drop out his first name, looked into this years and years ago, that when the moon returns to the shape it was the day you were born, you can spontaneously ovulate when you have sex.
Okay.
So this is, have you ever heard about this?
No. This is interesting.
So this is called your lunar peak. So your lunar peak in astrology, if we're not looking at fertility, is just your lunar peak. So day 8 of the cycle is this sacred day for everybody, whether you're female, male, non-gendered, whatever. But it's this sacred kind of reset of your 28-day cycle, going all the way back to the day you were actually born. And so it's this great day of insight and intuition, and it's a great day to kind of nourish yourself. And I actually like to use your lunar phase return or your lunar peak as like your own natural new moon in some ways. I mean, we always have the moon cycle to be working with, but your body started having its cycles from that actual peak. And then we have this research and theory, a lot of empirical data on being fertile at your lunar peak. So actually, if you're trying to conceive, there is a second window every month where you can have a go and potentially fall pregnant. And it literally we used to teach this in naturopathy years ago, and it's kind of dropped out of our teaching as we become more evidence-based. But these are referred to, when you have a baby that was born at your lunar peak, we refer to them as lunar babies. And I know people who have conceived and held pregnancies while they actually have their period, or just before they should be having their period, which you're supposed to not actually be able to conceive at that time. And modern medicine tends to say, obviously they're not going to acknowledge this, but they go, oh, some women just ovulate twice a month. Some women just ovulate more than once. And that's why they've conceived outside of their normal ovulation window. And so I don't focus so much on that new moon, full moon as I do whenever you're ovulating, and then also looking at your lunar peak, because when you're trying to fall pregnant, there's that stress over, you only have this 3 or 4 day window every month. And this gives you another window.
Yeah. Wow.
Or if you're having sex and you don't want a baby, it's another time to be careful.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's mind blowing. Like,
Yeah.
I really did not realize that our lunar peak, that lunar phase return, was so important for our bodies, and we could ovulate at that time. That's incredible. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Supposedly ovulate when you have sex. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's also theories that you ovulate the very first time you have sex, that the body kind of wakes up and goes, what's going on? Here's an egg.
Wow.
So yeah, for that
Wow.
first time, people having sex, maybe being a bit more cautious.
Yeah. Wow. Absolutely. Wow. Okay. So, what about women who have irregular cycles? Is there a way that they can kind of use the moon cycle to help them regulate their cycles, like in combination with other things like natural therapies, of course? But yeah, can the
Yeah.
moon play a role in that?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that's, again, you want to, if you've always been a 32-day cycle, it might not shift. But if people have things like polycystic ovarian syndrome or for other reasons, yeah, everything we do kind of naturopathically or natural living wise, eating better, there's certain hormones that are very good for adjusting, there's certain herbs for adjusting hormones. But also, again, being more ritualized with your health, working with the moon cycles. I often find a lot of women who just start to embody and look at, okay, it is the new moon, it is the full moon, whether you're doing rituals in a women's circle or you're just doing them by yourself. But I think tuning into that lunar energy and where it's at, whether it's trying to regulate a period or working on manifesting things in your life, I think the more in tune to that ritual shape of the moon that we get, often our body does try to adjust itself.
Yeah. That makes sense. That really makes sense. And that's good advice. I feel like it really resonates with me. Like when we start working with those things ritually and checking in with each new moon and full moon, it does definitely have a flow and effect to our bodies and our health.
Oh, I mean, there's, in any area, you can always see women doing rituals, or if you're online, you can see, people inviting people to new moon or full moon rituals. But I also think, your own health and your own body, we are very cyclical by nature. We have our circadian rhythms, our sleep wake cycle, which is around 24 hours. We have our hormone fluctuations over these 4 weeks or 28 days. And our bodies are so cyclical by nature, but we've removed ourselves so far from that, be it, light pollution, busy schedules, not sleeping enough. And I just think there's this whole side to women's health where we can, yes, we all want to slow down and be healthier, but as we tune into our own cycles and nature's cycles and look at, I try to teach clients, health is boring. Eating the same, really healthy every day, sleeping enough, to exercising, everybody knows all of that. But if we start to think about our health routine as a sacred ritual around our health, I think it becomes a lot more fun. And half the time that's what we're looking for, is fun to do with health, and we're more willing to do it. So I think there's a sacredness to being aware of something over that 4 weeks and that schedule of our own body, or the lunar, schedule, that then brings us into that better rhythm of, it's like knowing that week before your period, which is that high hormone week. Your progesterone's really high, estrogen's a bit high. We're having our food cravings. We feel bloated. It's an internal week. It's not the week to go out and conquer the world. It's high hormone means more internal, resting is, you don't want to be doing hard exercise that week. You want to be resting more and rejuvenating and nourishing. And we feel like that, but because of the way we live in the modern world, we just keep pushing ahead. And I think that depletes us as well. And if we can tune into those natural rhythms of those 4 weeks of our cycles, or 4 weeks of if we don't have a cycle, if you're on the pill or an IUD, or you're perimenopause and beyond, or a male or somebody that doesn't, anybody can tune into that cycle and really, ritualize health. Oh my gosh, I went off on a tangent. Sorry there.
No, that's perfect. And it's that awareness. Like I found when I first started new moon rituals quite a few years ago, it was just like that awareness of that new moon, and that's what like kind of led me towards like seeing the correlation between the menstrual cycle and the moon cycle and all that. And it was just this like awakening. So I think that's a really beautiful place for women to start if they are curious about their menstrual cycle, like checking with the moon, seeing where it falls with their lunar peak. That's really wonderful advice.
So I mean, modern world just makes us push on this 24-hour cycle, and the male body is a 24-hour cycle with testosterone, and we have things that are 24-hour cycled as well, but we are also so much more of a 4-week cycle of growth and creation and rest and relax. And I just think we don't give ourselves enough time and space to not be conquering the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
28 days of the month. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like the more that I like look into like the new moon cycle, the new moon cycle, and like looking at the new moon compared to the menstrual cycle, like these and menstruation, like when we menstruate and like at the new moon, they're both times when we should be resting, listening to our bodies, like not like just pushing.
Yes. I remember when I was studying naturopathy a long time ago, I was also seeing this gorgeous traditional Chinese medicine practitioner, this gorgeous little Chinese lady who had very little English, had immigrated from China, but was so wise, that old wise woman kind of energy. And I remember lying on, getting acupuncture, and she's like, "Oh, Kira, are you having your period? No exercise for you. No exercise. First day of cycle is nourishing. You stay home and you do nothing, and you go and you buy the oldest female chicken you can find, and you cook that up." I was like, what?
Wow.
And, but it was this whole, which, you go back to collagen and other nutrients that, if you're not plant-based, I don't want to offend anybody, but it was this whole ritual around, I remember her berating me because I do a lot of exercise, that, you're not supposed to be exercising the first day of your cycle. And it was like, it was divine to just be told that. It was divine to just go, oh yeah, you're right. I don't want to push today. My hormones are dropping. My body's trying to do something. And just acknowledging, hey, I'm allowed to have a rest day. And I learned that in my really early 20s, which is magical because I mean, I work with a lot of athletes, and I see these women just pushing and pushing. I'm like, there is no hard exercise on that day. Just let your body do its thing, and it will be kinder to you in return.
Yeah, absolutely. My last sort of question for you at the moment is, what advice do you have for women who, want to kind of connect their menstrual cycle with the moon cycle? Like how, are there some rituals that they could do, or what would you suggest for women who want to kind of sync things up or just have that deeper awareness?
So there's theories around going and spending time outside under the moon when it's visible, or even when it's not visible. I mean, we've had so much rain in Sydney, there's no visible moon half the time, but actually spending, it's not that you have to go camping and spend all these hours outside, but getting out into the moonlight and allowing, your body to be bathed in that, even if it's just an hour every night. Sleeping in dark rooms, taking certain herbs to try to adjust or regulate a cycle. Also just looking at the 4 weeks of a cycle, or however long somebody's cycle is. And, there's research coming out pointing to, from the time you get your period until ovulation, which is typically 14 days, not exact for everybody, but that's referred to as your follicular phase. And besides that first day where I've just told you to be resting, the follicular phase is what we call the low hormone phase, because progesterone isn't really being produced. There's estrogen at some point, but we know that we feel stronger. We have more stamina. We can actually train harder at the time. You hypothetically burn fuels better as far as exercise go. And it's that, new moon to full moon, just like we talk about when we're talking about, manifesting things. That's the creation phase of the cycle, right? Day 1 to day 14. You are building, you are growing, you are becoming. And then you have this ovulation peak. And then we have the second half of the cycle, which is called the luteal phase, higher hormone. The third week we can still do quite a lot, but that fourth week, we feel like being home. We feel like eating. We feel like nurturing, having baths, and not training it. We're not supposed to exercise as hard or do more gentle, walking yoga style exercises. Nourishing ourselves more, not trying to push as hard. I find if women even just tune into doing that, this growth phase and then retreat or rest phase, often a lot of their health and sometimes their menstrual cycle will tune into that as well and go, oh, you're finally allowing me to have my cycle, and just celebrating that cyclical nature of rest, I think, is amazing. And I find there's a lot of tuning in when that happens.
Yeah, I think that's so beautiful. Like just tuning in to our own cycles and listening to our bodies, and then our health will kind of just fall into place, really.
Yeah. Well, our body is always trying to do cycles, and it's always trying to adjust. But if we continually push, if we continually have that high stress cortisol, exhausting our adrenals, it struggles to find its cycles. And we just need to give our body time to actually create and rest. And if we look at nature and we look at the seasons, it's the same thing. All of nature works on these cycles, yet we're somehow trying to stay awake and push and do all this stuff. And we're getting so far removed from that it's about tuning into that to try to get your body back into its rhythm.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
So before we leave, how can our listeners work with you if they want to know more about medical astrology
Sure.
and natural health? Yeah, let us know how they
Sure.
can find you.
Awesome. So my website is Astrology of Health, as is all my social media. So it's quite easy to find. So that is my, the side of what I do, that it's kind of naturopathy, medical astrology, my sacred side, as I call it. And I do, when I see people for medical astrology, I do treat naturopathically as well. So yeah, that's where you can find me. Or if you're a sports addict looking for a naturopath, I have a whole other website that's more straight, no medical astrology, more sciencey naturopathy sports nutrition, and that's just kirasutherland.com.au. Basically, you can Google me and find anything. You'll find them all.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, Kira, for being on the Moon Manifesting podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
Such a pleasure. This chat has been so informative. I've learned lots, and I'm sure that our listeners will also learn lots about the menstrual cycle and the moon cycle. So thank you.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's funny, I had to write a little article today exactly on the moon as well. So it's very big timing. So I'm like, oh, what am I supposed to be tuning into today? But I actually think it's my lunar peak today. So that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
Everyone should go look up their lunar peak. That's one other thing to really work on.
Absolutely. If you haven't already looked up when your lunar phase return is, that is, some homework for all you listeners today.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Kira.